It is well recognized that the Legend of Zelda series has been one of the staples of fandom in video games over the last few decades, and one of the biggest drivers of that is wondering what the next experience will be like. Ever since Ocarina of Time graced us in 1998, the games have been building upon the adventure elements that existed in this game. Dungeons, boss battles, new takes on the familiar territories, all in service to adding more content to an expanding timeline. Recently, though, Nintendo has taken a new approach to what was essentially an ever-expanding narrative. In fact, narrative is kind of an afterthought in this new formula. This is unfortunate due to the fact that the games have been steeped in story for so long. The characters were one of the main draws to emotionally connecting with the games. And due to how the new games are structured, it makes connecting with the characters extremely difficult. In this video, I wanted to talk about where Zelda could go as a franchise, given its extremely polished roots, in terms of becoming a masterful mix of both adventure and narrative. So why are the OG Zelda games so compelling? Well, first and foremost, they are an extremely thorough look at the hero's journey. It's all about maturing from a sheltered boy in an isolated community to becoming a brave and courageous savior of all that is good. Much like any popular piece of visual media, it distinguishes good from evil in very clear parameters and puts you in the uplifting position of facing the demonic power as an embodiment of good. It also is one of the best examples of a series where the hero needs the ability of his damsel to win over evil. This highlights that both courage and wisdom are far greater values than power, but in a very Eastern way. The games also explain that these three concepts are a unified part of a whole. The Legend of Zelda is the perfect amalgamation of the traditional Western hero and the wisdom of Eastern philosophy. We see this courage and wisdom embodied not just in our hero, but in all the life that he protects. The Zelda games have always created a compelling case for why Hyrule is worth protecting. The goodness of its people, the pureness of its guardians, the sacredness of its land. All of these facets are thoroughly explored through the level design and the narrative setup. In many cases, it is literally a battle between the forces of light and darkness. This symbolism is the most present in Twilight Princess, where we see the sages of light putting away the power of the Dark One, and we see the Dark One bending the light to his will through the power of Twilight, a mediating gray area in between the two forces. This gray area is completely dependent on its leadership in terms of which side of the yin and yang to side with. Most importantly, these symbolic embodiments of morality are delivered to us through characters with conflicts and motives, adding an element of will to the pursuit of what is good or evil. Maturity, responsibility, and the will to fight for your values are at the core what the themes of Zelda games are. So what have Zelda games become? Well, I think one of the biggest reasons why these new games are not clicking with everyone is because the themes have become window dressing to what is essentially a game about creating your own experience. With Breath of the Wild, it was hard to be critical of the themes of the story because the point of the game was reflecting on the aftermath of events and embracing a meditative exploration of something that was once familiar to us as a hero's journey. It was a fresh take on something that we grew to understand in a specific context, and it resonated with a lot of people, to the point of creating record-breaking sales for any Zelda game ever. However, with Tears of the Kingdom trying to play in the same sandbox, it becomes abundantly clear that the story is not the important part anymore. The hero that was once focused on his role in the story is now distracted. The side characters that were once the focus of the different segments of the story are now one-dimensional and indistinguishable in their motives. The world that was once affected by the story has become stagnant, waiting on the player to interact with it. The Zelda landscape has become a playground, more so than a journey. It is a wide, beautiful world, but it lacks focus and urgency. The reason for this is because there is no linear connective tissue between one story beat and the next. This completely undermines what was truly impactful and emotionally satisfying about Zelda games. So, potential. I greatly value the structure and themes of the old Zelda games. In my humble opinion, we need to go back to this narrative progression that resonated with so many people. This doesn't mean that we need to create a zone-loading Ocarina of Time mechanic game. Nintendo proved to the world that exploration and open environments are a fresh way to experience Link's traversal through the land of Hyrule. There is no reason to go back to a world that feels segmented by loading screens. We can have both an interconnective open world and a structured story. There's no reason that we shouldn't be told where to go next in the franchise that thrives off of linear storytelling when it comes to the core story of a game. You can have other things to explore and other quests to accomplish in the open world too. But when it comes to being able to access certain parts of the game, it should be linear. Dungeons, temples, being able to begin certain interactions in cities and towns with specific characters, all of these things need structure. If you're going to emulate the hero's journey we saw in Ocarina of Time through Skyward Sword, a narrative needs to feel like it goes somewhere. Characters need to grow one step at a time. Villains need a presence throughout the hero's journey. Scattered pieces of exposition and unlimited freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, doesn't work in the context of what people fell in love with Zelda for. I miss the growth and development of characters and plots in the Legend of Zelda franchise, and I know many other people do as well. I can only hope that Nintendo will someday give us one of these stories again that sits inside of our soul and makes us think about how we can be more courageous. Unfortunately, they have traded the Triforce of market power for the Triforce of narrative wisdom. Maybe someday we'll be able to ride through the fields of Hyrule knowing that our next step is to fulfill some kind of purpose that will teach us some kind of lesson. But for now, I guess we just play in the sandbox. Or we don't play at all.